Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon wherever you guys are. This is Sarbjeet Johal. I am here with Dion Hinchcliffe. We're going to riff on this topic of future of cloud. That's in context to what happened last week. What happened last week was Google did their Google Cloud Next event, which is their annual event, and Microsoft had their Microsoft Ignite event last week. And as we speak this week, Oracle Cloud, Oracle Open Cloud, I think they've renamed it from Oracle Open World to Oracle um, Open Cloud. That's happening in Las Vegas right now for last 2 days, and they have made some announcements. And HashiCorp event happened a couple of weeks back, and there's a lot happening. There's a lot of events in this context. So, with that said, Dion, welcome to this live session. And you're coming live from Europe or something?
Yeah, I'm actually in the south of France right now. So thanks, Sarbjeet, for having me, and looking forward to the conversation and probably some debate.
Yeah, we will definitely debate debate some of the topics which we usually do, not intentionally, but we don't agree on everything, which is a good thing, I think. And to our viewers who are watching, please join us. It's really live. It's not we're not playing it like you know a recording or something. So we'll take your comments live, and if some of you guys want to say something towards the end, we will put you on and you can express your views and stuff like that. So, with that said, how do you see, Dion, how do you see these two events, the parallels between those and or differences? Let's talk about that. We will talk about the reInvent, which will happen in about 30 days or so.
Sure. So you know, there were some themes they had in common, I thought. So clearly, data is a hot topic. So we've got lots of announcements. I mean, the announcements for Ignite were just out of control. I mean, getting your mind wrapped around those is difficult. But Google had a lot of good announcements too. Everything from BigQuery support for unstructured data, all kinds of support for deep support, data support for Apache Iceberg, Delta Lake, Spark. But it was also AI was another big theme they both had. I like what stood out for me was responsible AI scorecards for Microsoft. I just wasn't expecting that one, which was great. And lots of course, open AI updates, including access to DALL-E 2 and everything. But it was definitely a data management, data, enterprise data, app data was a big theme. AI on top of all of that, lots of maturity, points too. And of course, Google had a lot of enterprisey stuff that they wanted to get into mainframes and confidential computing for public sector work. So they did a lot of announcements there. So I see a lot of what you call, I think feature velocity. They've keeping up the blistering pace of adding all sorts of very interesting, like the Open XLA project. It was a minor announcement in the corner of everything, but it's a huge open source ecosystem of machine learning technologies with all kinds of support from Google and AMD and ARM and Intel and NVIDIA. So it was really exciting to see all of this intensity, this tech intensity, but I'm seeing the market's having trouble absorbing all these things. They're in competition with each other almost on a checklist basis. What did you think, Sarvi?
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. Actually, Google had 123 announcements, and they have this page here, which I actually was looking at. I've been looking at it for the last couple of days to in order to digest it. And then Microsoft had 90, not 94, 102 or something like that. So more than 100 announcements from Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tweet this later. These links actually have done that, so that they have written themselves about what they have announced in the
Yeah,
last
they don't call
100.
it a press release or announcements now. They call it a book of announcements is what they're calling it. It's so funny.
Yes, actually, Microsoft call it book. Yeah, book of news. It says October
Mhm.
12th to 14th, and it
And
is
it is a
really a
book.
book.
I'm not kidding.
Yeah, actually, yeah. So my 2 cents are that a lot was common. Productivity software, especially the productivity software layer, both talking about AI, NLP, like how you can uh, add it to document, while you're working together as a team. You can have a video conference from a document, so those lines are blurred from the productivity software side of things, right? Both have good
Yeah, and I
portfolio.
think they're table stakes. I mean, they have the two
Yeah.
far and away most competitive products in the SaaS productivity space. They're the leading offerings in the market, and they don't have feature parity. Google's a little bit behind, has always been. But Google's not worried about that. They think they're offering what most people need anyway. So I view a lot of those as important table stakes announcements, but they're tactical compared to some of these other things. Data is going to rule the world, and AI is going to ensure that that actually happens. And I think those, if you ask me, those are the two biggest announcements. It's just a lot of the deep functionality around really understanding human language. There was lots of vision announcements. Both of them are trying. It's like what Musk is running into. He's discovering that where this is all leading him is building intelligence that can navigate the real world, navigate our businesses, navigate our lives, and all the data that we have. That's what's emerging. I see that in many of the announcements both Google and Microsoft had.
Yeah, actually, I was going to go through this a little bit methodically, like just talk about the productivity software, put that aside very quickly, and then talk about the actual cloud, what we call cloud infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, right? So on the productivity side, I think they're very, as you said, they have parity. I think when you say they don't have, Google doesn't have parity, I think they have one advantage. Google has a free tier. All the kids in the school, and as soon as you start typing, you can start using Google productivity suite, Google Docs and all that, but they might have limited functionality and all that stuff, but you can start playing with it, so their accessibility is huge as
It's like
compared
the
to
Apple
Microsoft.
Advantage. The kids learn on Google Docs. It was called Google Docs anyway. And then they eventually graduate to Microsoft, right? So it's kind of like the Apple on ramp too, because of the schools.
It run on the iOS. Yeah, it's amazing how this competition actually is benefiting the customers. It does actually at the end of the day. Not having one company skewing sort of all these features and all this force, if you will, software force towards one end, that's not good for anybody, including vendors. So coming to the cloud side, actual cloud infrastructure and service and platform as service, I believe um, we know that Microsoft is well entrenched into the sort of corporate culture and boots on the ground, and Google is the new kid on the block, relatively speaking, from B2B software side of things, and they are still fighting some of that fight, but they come across more as an open, multi-cloud friendly, and data science friendly. But this time they, I think, talked a lot more about the customer, right? Than them themselves. Like what they are doing. Very few. They happen to be, usually they are, and still this time as well as compared to Microsoft, they're very more like futuristic, painting the picture like where we are headed, right? But this time they toned it down a little bit, which I think is a welcome step, because I think talking too much about the future leaves the people like who have or having problems right now worried about, like, hey, I am having this problem. We are not talking about this problem. Uh, yes, we will change these things later, but we need that sort of these current problems addressed. And on that note, actually, I think I also see these things like in different buckets. I usually call it economics of the practitioner versus economics of the business, right? I think those things are important when you're a vendor, and also from the consumer side of things, right? As a practitioner, who should I go with? Whose technology I should learn, whose certifications I want to go get, right? I think that's important. And what's your take on that? Like different economics for
I
as an
think that
individual
is
versus the company.
so. Can't make a decision about your cloud platform without taking into account what your skill base is going to be inside your organization. The big complaint I still get with Google Cloud is if you have a big company that wants to commit, there's just not enough skilled Google Cloud people out there who are really advanced, who are architect level, and that's because it's in third place. It's not as widely adopted, and is doing okay actually in the enterprise, which is what their primary target is. They're not going after that many the startup community with quite the same hunger as they are with the enterprise community. But AWS is the big dog, and you'll always have a career, no matter what happens. And Google has the Google graveyard, and it gives people pause. I've written about this a number of times, saying stop it. There's always this fear that services you're going to depend on are going to go away. Apps that you really need to run your business are going to go away, and they have. The Google graveyard is quite large, so that I think you combine all of these concerns, and that creates some resistance both at the organizational level and do I really want to? I can get a lot more work if I go with Azure or AWS. But that said, Google Cloud is increasingly, it looks like it's here to stay. And it is becoming a very big ecosystem. I think that you're going to be able to build a developer base. It's just you're not going to be able to get talent for it, even so, like the other two.
Yeah, actually, if we compare Google Cloud to Microsoft, that's a different story. But if you compare Google Cloud to AWS, then it's like, yeah, there's a big gap still, right? And of course, the gap is there between Azure and AWS as well. But they have narrowed that gap, actually. Another sort of gripe I have with these cloud providers is that they don't show the numbers separately from infrastructure versus their productivity software, or SaaS versus the rest of it, rest of the cloud portfolio, especially the Microsoft and uh, um, Google, right? Because
Well,
most of
if it was really good on the if it was really good, they would publish those numbers. They're making a tremendous amount on the productivity software.
Yeah, they make a lot of money from the productivity software, both of these, and then AWS is it is almost negligible, presence of SaaS. They
Yeah,
have
they
some.
don't really compete in that space. Microsoft arguably makes most of their money from Microsoft 365, right? So, and Azure is
Yeah,
still number two. So,
yeah, and on that note, I think that transparency can be better, right? Transparency, but like retiring the services, like why they're retiring it, who that will impact, how many customers are on a service when somebody retires a service. And we actually, as a developer, the last thing I want to worry about is like, hey, this API I'm using is going to go away. Like it's a very scary thing to think about. I think
and
Google needs
businesses
to.
don't want it either. I mean,
Yeah.
I've been tracking APIs since they first emerged in the early 2000s, commercial APIs. And one of the most important things is the businesses, your partners, which are the ones that are paying you, right? So those are your customers as well. They are betting their businesses and their future on that API, that it's going to be there. And that's really the challenge that Google has to some extent that AWS and Azure just don't have.
Yeah, actually, I'm not seeing any comments coming from LinkedIn or Twitter. Maybe this thing is not working, or actually, I'm going to fire this up on this and just keep it mute and see if there are any comments or something like that. So yeah, okay. The one part of these conferences is talking about the partnerships and alliances, right? How did you see that, like comparing these two? And also, let's weave in the AWS as well, like who has the edge there. And while we are talking about the partnership and alliances, I think we could, in the same sort of segment of you all, we can talk about um, the marketplace as well, like strength of the marketplace.
Well, Google knows they have an issue with their partner program compared to, again, they would be sitting pretty and be an amazing cloud provider leading the world if it wasn't for two things: AWS and Azure. Right? Um, I hear distinct complaints that their partner ecosystem can't field the number of people that organizations need to do rapid digital transformation. If you're an insurance company, and I talked to an insurance company CIO who said, I needed 300 Google Cloud folks to move all of our services over, massive 3-year effort. I couldn't get them. I couldn't even come close. Those kinds of numbers do exist on the AWS and the Azure side, and that's a real problem. So Google has took pains to make many partner announcements. I don't have them all in front of me, but the one that really stood out was Accenture, which is, they're at the top of the gene pool in professional services and in digital services now, and they have a massive bench, and that name gives a lot of assurances that you're going to have the people that you need. So there was quite a bit of high profile around that, and I thought that was smart. They need to do that, and they're as they continue to work on becoming a more attractive player in that regard.
Yeah, actually, I just pulled up the page where this showed all the news, but under different sections. They did a Coinbase. They highlighted the Coinbase from Google guys, right? And Australian
Which
Securities
was
Exchange.
a strange announcement that you'd even make
I
an
know
announcement. It was at the end, but I can't see they would have that many, Web3 companies who want to pay in crypto to use Google Cloud, but maybe they do.
Yeah, I think they want to show that we are Web3 friendly. It was like the kind of checkbox kind of thing. We'll see what they do with them. And Snap was there.
And
Toyota,
they've announced that they have, that blockchain is here or coming. I mean, it's so they have a lot of those things. They have a whole division now for Google Cloud, but we haven't heard much about what they're going to do yet.
True. Darren is saying, is Google just not investing enough on the training certification side of things? It actually looks like it. I think not the maybe training, but on the marketing side of things, I think they look a lot timid as compared to AWS. I did a poll recently, I think last month or so, that, hey, how do you see Google Cloud's GTM go-to-market sort of strategy or planning and strategy or execution against AWS? And I did poll on both, Twitter and LinkedIn. Both polls were very similar. They said GTM from Google seems very weak, almost malnutritioned as compared to AWS. I mean, I know a bunch of people at Google Cloud, as well as AWS, and a little less at Microsoft. They seem to be like, I don't know where they live. So actually, the difference.
AWS has more of a bottoms up approach. Microsoft has always had this big IT ecosystem. So they've got the IT audience, the traditional IT audience sewed up, but that's a very big audience. Globally, that's absolutely massive because every company has Microsoft. Where Google, if you're familiar with their Office of the CTO, they have a very special program where they really try and land these really big strategic deals. And they do land it with that. They just have a different approach to doing it. It's very Google-like approach, very brainy, very deliberate, very thought out. And they're very confident in it, and that even if it takes them a little while, that they're doing the right thing. But I would agree with Darren, who's out there watching, is they're probably not investing enough compared to, given the fact they have to compete with AWS and Azure and the richness of resources. There's just going to be 10 times more stuff for those cloud providers than there is going to be for Google out there, just because of the way that it breaks down. So the number 3 position is really killing them. It's holding them down and preventing the kinds of investment that they need to make to really break out. They would have to invest 2, 3, 4 times what they're investing if they really wanted to catch, let's say, Microsoft. I don't think they can catch Amazon. I don't think the Google board or the Alphabet board is prepared to do what it's going to take to spend, to put the capex into, that level. It would be unsupportable, I think. So this is where they are.
I agree with you. I think they need to invest a lot more there, and they have announced like they will train, I think, 20 million or something in like next 5 years. I mean, that is a very vague statement, to be honest with you. Like 20 million on what part of the cloud? Is that more on productivity software, or like, are we talking about the developers? Like, you're training developers to use the APIs on infrastructure as a service and platform as a service side. So I think that has to be clarified. These broad strokes of announcements, they don't do much service. Actually, they people just say, man, like whatever, right? So AWS has announced similar number, actually, in tens of millions they will train. I've tweeted that about those announcements in the recent past. In Microsoft is doing their own thing, like training a lot of people on the cloud. They announced big numbers as well. But I think the key is the skills gravity, which I've talked about a lot about in my talks, that once you start using any technology, your skills have gravity. You want to use the same technology. You want to leverage your investment into that technology. And actually, just before we fired up this live session, I was thinking, downstairs, coming upstairs, I was thinking, like, who invests what in the cloud, right? When you pick a vendor, who plays what role? I think developers mainly invest their time, right? Because somebody else is paying for the cloud, right? So they invest their time and some reputation as well, developers, right? But when you go up from developer, architects and SVPs, VPs, SVPs of the infrastructure and applications at these companies, and C-level people, they actually invest their reputation when they pick a vendor, right? So their reputation is at stake if something goes wrong.
Absolutely.
Developers,
And in A-list companies, in high-performing companies, you don't get to make a career mistake. You've been promoted because you hadn't made any mistakes up to that point. I mean, I know of organizations like this where that's it. You bet on the wrong horse and send the company down the wrong path. That's it for your career, at least there. And for those tend to be high-performing organizations that do that. And that sort of approach is makes it difficult to bet on a third horse. So.
yep, it's interesting how so the consumption side of the technology, these vendors, I think they need to study that more, like how people consumes, why people consume what they consume, and then they want to be in front of that. And the feature proximity uh, is another sort of term I'm putting out there, like which you mentioned earlier, right? So the breadth of technology with each provider, that plays a huge role as well. So when you're doing data analysis the old way, now you want to do data science, ML, AI. Where do you go get that feature? Do you go to another provider, or you just stay with the current one you have? So I think having the plethora of features, NLP, natural language processing, voice, video APIs, that if you don't have that, then you're malnutrition. I think Google is catching up on the product side, as I think we all tend to agree on that. But it's a GTM side of things, and the trained practitioners which are available in the market from again comes to the skills gravity. People, you have to, as a vendor, you have to train a lot of people to defy the skills gravity of the leader in the space, right? So you have to train like hell. So that's there. Another aspect I was thinking of, who was bluffing a little bit more, like, oh, we are number one, we are the best, blah blah blah. The how was the authenticity
Well,
score of?
that's just in the eye of the beholder. And what was interesting is how many times Microsoft mentioned cost in their book of news. 30 times.
Mm-hmm.
And they have specific announcements for those that want them. They didn't lead with these things, but for those that want them, they focused on both compute cost reductions by using spot instances and innovative new ways, storage reductions, how to get your databases optimized. There was cost throughout the entire book of news. And I think one of the things we're really hearing is this, and it's mostly self-inflicted, I think. Most people are not rigorous enough in their use of cloud to really rein in, understand their spending and rein it in. That is a big problem, and a whole cottage industry is sprung up. But I thought Microsoft did a notable job in without emphasizing it too much, putting cost through all of their news, cost reduction.
Yeah, I think economics matters the most. Maybe I'm biased because of being
Certainly the
economist.
CFO.
Because at the end, it matters. Because if you're just blowing up money, and out sooner or later you will be crushed, right? So as a consumer and or a provider, right? So and also I think it's timely sort of narrative, if you will, because economy is in this little downturn. We'll see how bad it gets. The rates are going up, the cost of capital is high. I usually say that cloud does good in a bad economy, and cloud does better in a you know uh, good economy, because different type of workloads start going there. Because in a bad economy, the capex, people want to avoid the capex, and so they don't want to invest in their data centers and or on-prem technologies. That they tend to go to the public cloud. Having said that, the likes of Dell and HPE, they have changed their pricing to match the the paper drip. Even if they have on-prem technologies, you're paying as you use, which is a very um, weird or hybrid kind of approach to consuming technologies, but it's still there. I mean, and on that note, how do you see these incumbents or second tier cloud players, if you will? You can call it private cloud or hybrid cloud players. How do you see them? They're trying to tell the multi-cloud story. Let's talk a little bit about them, because they're trying to sit in the marketplace of these big vendors as well.
Well, I think my position, which is that we're going to see the middle of the cloud market fragment because there's room, there's niches to put them. So some of these are really specializing in certain things, like certain geographies or certain types of traffic. There's a lot of cloud providers won't take anything crypto related or even anything Web3 related because there's a risk that it's tied to crypto. So there's second tier cloud providers that says, well, we're gonna have no problem with that. Or I've seen due to traffic patterns, like if you're trying to serve up streaming video to Africa, the best place to do that is in the south of Europe because of all the undersea pipelines. So you see a lot of regional data centers and cloud service providers finding space there. And by the way, the number one customers are Amazon, Microsoft, Google Cloud. But if you don't want to go to those guys, you can just get your own, basically bare metal servers and other hosting at a much lower price. I mean, right now the three hyperscalers are premium price, and that's going to become an increasing issue because I don't see Moore's law being passed down to the customer. I see that being passed into R&D and all these features, these amazing books of news. I see that's where the Moore's law savings is getting rolled into, and then of course building all the massive infrastructure and the huge capex required to keep all of this going. Global investments. Google announced 5 new regions. Those are not small feat. Those regions are probably not huge, but that's still a lot of capex. And so I think we're seeing, until the market matures and stops basically growing, we're not going to see the dividends from the premium players get passed down to the customer. So I think that all of this leaves lots of room. And you can probably provide your economic analysis of that. This is creating very appealing niche markets for these second tier providers who I'm now I'm hearing from CIOs that they actually look at these now, and they're now brokers. I remember, Sarbjeet, I challenged you a couple of years ago. I said, I see brokers coming. They'll help you get better spot market prices for your workloads when you're ready to do that. And until containers got big enough and Kubernetes got big enough, that wasn't going to happen. But now if you build your workloads right, you can put them anywhere in any cloud.
Yeah, actually, there's another side to it. Actually, the side sort of story, if you will, is another thing. I went to the Dell Tech World, right, and I watched the HPE, what they're doing, and IBM and Oracle. They're trying to fight the cloud sort of gravity, if you will. There's a I think DevOps. I think we have talked about this in the past, right? The DevOps, I believe, I see that very openly, has done a lot of damage to the to the consumer of the tech, as well as the producers of the tech, right? These tech companies,
Well,
and
name two groups that don't like each other: Dev and Ops. They hate each other, and DevOps is created so they're forced to work together, but they don't want to. It's like democracy. It's the worst form of working, developing and rolling out systems, except for every other one.
yeah, actually, I kind of double clicked on it like many times, and again double click on each sort of topic. So traditionally, the dev to ops ratio was like many dev teams and one ops team mostly. Maybe two
Yep.
at a big company.
Oh yeah, an ops team can
Divided by
manage internal applications with no trouble.
Now we are changing that. We're skewing that. That's one thing. And the second thing is that what DevOps that people end up talking about, it's very good for likes of Twitter, Facebook, Google, AWS. They're cooking up the stuff as a service for other people to consume. But when you're Ford, Chrysler, Bank of America, you're not doing that. If you go even below that, the companies which are Fortune 1,000 plus, or between Fortune 2,000, 1,000 and 2,000, or even below that, like mid market, people can get bogged down doing that work. Number one. Number two is that there's in that sort of space, there's a when we cook up the software, right? We want to operate that, with some certainty. Like we're not always writing software. We're not the ISVs. Most of the enterprises are not ISVs, and that's that old term, but we can call it like software shops. We're not software shops. We have other businesses what we're running. So once we create the software, we operate it. So creation of the software on the left and operation of the software on the right, they're two different sort of acts, if you will. There can be some continuity for 3 to 6 months or 1 year, but then it's not like always on thing. And I believe, I mean, there's no doubt on the left side, the number one cost is developer cost because laptops and these workstations are very cheap. And then you deploy stuff on the right, which is where the number one cost is the infrastructure, right? Plus security and a few other bells and whistles.
Well, once the
So you
development's
have,
done, the cost drops to zero. You can't drop the cost of operations to zero or anything close to it. Operations always just goes on and on and on.
yeah. So I think you have
It's
to.
the opposite of application development.
So I think if you focus on economics, which I'm a big economics buff when it comes to tech, you have to focus on the these two types of economics and separately. And I think if you talk in that terms, then these old guard vendors start looking good. Say, hey, we specialize on the economics on the right side, because on the left side you cannot even fight with the public cloud. On they beat you, hands down. So on the developer productivity side and all that stuff, like experimentation, rate of experimentation and whatnot. So I think these guys need to tell that story in a different way. Um, we can talk about these things actually for hours. At high level, I have so many topics here. Um, how about Oracle? Just let's talk briefly because they're doing their thing right now. It's kind of side story there.
So I have not been tracking the Oracle announcements that closely. I hate to say it, but I just don't find them that relevant. I have a lot of CIOs I work with who have big investments in Oracle, and I have to say, to a large extent, they're not planning on using Oracle for general purpose cloud. And not only that, but I continue to see Microsoft in particular creating all sorts of tools to get people off of Oracle and onto a cheap Postgres instance in Azure. In fact, there was just a brand new migration analysis service that was released at Ignite that will help you figure out what you actually have to do that. Now, of course, that's not really Oracle's core business anymore. But I mean, they're clearly looking at, they're starting there and they're going to go up the stack. So I view Oracle as a me too in cloud. They know that they have to do it. They did not spot it. They didn't call it, and when they first got involved in cloud, they called it all wrong, and they said the wrong things. And they haven't improved a whole lot. And so I think Larry did so much to create the early computer business, but they missed the cloud boat, and they're not even a serious player for anyone who's looking at doing greenfield cloud development. Oracle is not on the list. So that's kind of where I sit. That said, I think that heavy investors in existing Oracle suites and ERP systems are going to want to look at Oracle Cloud to run a lot of that infrastructure, and that's where a lot of their growth is going to be.
Yeah, for a couple of years back, they were seen as host, they were hosting their own application, in their own cloud, right? So managed cloud kind of provider, if you will. And they are trying to change that image. I think of course, they will have a hard time. The boats have sailed, So people have taken.
Well, Oracle software is very reliable, especially the closer you get down in the infrastructure. Their engineers are legendary at writing incredibly stable enterprise class systems, like SAP in that regard. So from that standpoint, you can't write them off. I just, I don't see, even if they were doing even some of the things Google Cloud was doing, you'd see them, being the fourth growing player, the number 4 player, and then growing. I think they have the raw talent to do that. I just don't think they have the leadership, the CapEx prepared to do that. And they're not, they're not going to win the developers out there. They just can't get the skills gravity that you talk about.
Yeah. They actually, on that side, actually, the accessibility to Oracle Cloud is very poor. You can't just go there and say, okay, like these top 3, you can just spin up a free account and play with it for more than a year, and just cook up stuff, and then learn about the technology as a practitioner, as a person who's starting up a company and whatnot, or doing experimentation within a big enterprise. But with Oracle, it's a lot of heavy lifting. Their engagement process, it's very, they acknowledged that during this annual event yesterday.
They're a top-down, sales-driven organization.
Yeah.
I've never seen an organization where when the sales rep for Oracle leaves, that the IT department throws them a party. I've never seen anything like
that. Oracle bus. I used to be part of that. We call it Oracle bus. Like the 2 people
they're a
from
top-down
the customers.
organization in so many ways, including how cloud adoption, which is they're probably not the way that they should be doing it.
Yeah, great talent there, definitely. I've seen it firsthand, but I'm with you. So any sort of futuristic sort of predictions for cloud in general, but also we did that like I think a year before last year, about the reInvent. What do you think reInvent will announce, and what their posture will be? And those 2 things are separate, whether like overall.
I think you're gonna see a lot of betting on infrastructure, really far out infrastructure. Like there are 5G networks on demand. They made it so anybody could put a 5G network that ran Amazon services anywhere in the world on demand. Just boom, if you wanted to do that, you could. And announcements around space in particular, and satellite constellations. We're going to see a lot of really advanced announcements in that space, is my guess. They're betting that all this stuff is. We're not done with the network story by a long shot, and I think they're probably right. I'm not sure the timing is right, but they want to be first. They like being before anyone anyway. They're comfortable losing money doing it for years, so that they own it ultimately. But I think network's about to really get into everything. I think so. We'll see lots of that. We'll see also more data announcements. I'll see the same thing, because AI is turning out to be the battlefield, and you see what Tesla is doing with Dojo. And trying to one up NVIDIA and saying that it's an arms race on compute power. There's actually a shortage of compute power to run all these giant models. We're now seeing these billion parameter machine learning models. We see GPT-3. You're seeing all these amazing AIs that can generate video off of plain text scripts, but they use these giant models that consume enormous power. And I'm now advising on model ops, which is systematically running thousands of AI models to train up on your business. That's becoming a CIO office level capabilities, not ML ops, but model ops, which is about how do you do governance and debiasing and ensure you have a consistent set of models across all your different ML frameworks. So I think we'll see Amazon announcing a lot of things around both deeper data management, powerful analytics, more powerful machine learning, and maybe some new chip announcements. Because if Tesla keeps going the way they're going, they're going to end up with the cheapest AI compute power out there. And every business has to be running models all the time. If you don't want to fall behind, you have to be continually up-training your models to the latest conditions and the new things your business is doing and the new things your business needs to be doing. AI will do that, but that means continuously running massive, billion parameter models, and soon tens and hundreds of billions of parameters, and there's not enough compute power to do it. So I suspect we will see some chip announcements that start to do these advanced AI architectures. I think we'll see that as well. So expect lots of data, news of every kind, analytics every kind, and going deep into the network. And we'll see some enterprisey stuff too. Just like we saw more mainframe announcements with Google Cloud Next. Not big, but they're keeping their hand in that game.
Yeah, actually, I remember seeing mainframe mentioned at AWS keynotes from Andy and Jassy couple of times in the last 5 years. I've heard that as well, so it's not new. And I think the one thing actually I have distilled down into sort of one sentence. I'll try to do that. Is that innovation favors scale, and cloud has scale. On the hardware side, most of the innovation which is going into hardware side of things, chips and NICs and all the storage and all that, it favors cloud actually. It favors huge movement of data from one place to other, and the thicker pipes, right? And
well, cloud
but
forces
that
it has these huge demands for bandwidth and compute that requires demands insane economies of scale that only the big hyperscalers can provide.
can afford,
It's
can afford, and yeah. So it's like it used to be. Like when I was at Rackspace, we used to have a slide. It's like a unit of cloud is more expensive than a unit of on-prem, same unit, right? But you can benefit from the public cloud because you can shut it down, or you can variability of demand, all this stuff. Your demand curve and supply curve hugs each other, all this good stuff, right? But things are flipping now. I think I don't think I will have like an easy time saying that it's a unit of cloud is cheaper on-prem. I think it's cheaper over there, but that's why they have margins, and they can reduce their margins to gain more market share if they want to. I believe, and more innovation means that things become cheaper and cheaper. We have seen that's how tech happens, right? Tech becomes cheaper and cheaper as you progress. Um, but another thing I think we need to touch upon very briefly is, okay, by the way, one more comment about the reInvent. I think they will bring more stuff down to your data center, and their offering, which is sort of cloud in a box.
I think there's lots of hybrid and edgy type things, a narrowband 5G, and some appliances. Yeah.
That more and more some. I think they will just do some more telco friendly stuff, because telcos are still a bit relevant when it comes to the edge, and we haven't talked about edge at all on this whole discussion. But edge is a part of the discussion for cloud providers. Most cloud providers end up talking about it, and because most of the data will be produced and consumed at the edge, right? So, and the data models will be uh, running there, or inference will happen mostly there. And I totally agree with you that we need continuous training of models. You can't just train model and leave it there. Things change in the world, as you say, billion parameter models, and I usually say that a system is as smart as it takes the number. A system is as smart as the number of variables it takes into account while making a decision. So, like, that's what models are. So if your model is taking a few sort of parameters into account, variables in account, it's not a very good model. It has to have more sort of features, if you will, into these models, and they have to be continuously trained models, right? So, last few words on edge, and then we'll wrap it up.
Well, so going back to poor Google Cloud, they're discontinued their core IoT service next year. I mean, this is the kind of thing that just throws people for a loop who've made and make investments. Now, most likely they're doing that because it hasn't been very widely adopted. But still, this is the kind of retrograde thing which is damaging, and you would not see from an Azure or an Amazon. And so I think Amazon's pushing the innovation right now the most on edge. I think Microsoft probably has things coming that will get parity with it. But it is really important, especially with the balkanization of computer networks globally that seems to be coming, and we have much more disruptive operating environments. So whether it's a pandemic or economic problems or a war in Europe, you've got this need for much more data in all the different areas between the center and the edge. And it's IoT and all those related services are going to get it there. So I expect we'll see Amazon really building on their advantage. Now they've got the basics in place to do some really advanced things. You can put an edge anywhere you want using Amazon's 5G appliances and set up a whole network on an island or in a disaster zone or in a hurricane where a hurricane hit. You can do all sorts of very interesting things and I think they're definitely going to build on that
That I think we should wrap up. I believe I usually say that tech is like medicine. Every pill has a side effect, and cloud has its own side effects as well. And in these sharp brains, wise minds, they tread these sort of waters very carefully, and they need to, and they need. I highly suggest people who are um, jumping into the cloud, deeper now. Everybody has jumped into it somewhat, but they're going into deep waters. They should consult with people who have done it, people who are close to it, people who sort of think day in day out about these things. But like, what's the best posture? Like how can you be prolonging your um, life as a business, number one, and also stretching your dollars. Doing more with less is important, especially during these such times, and also keeping your talent happy and being a talent magnet as well. So, what technology you will pick, and how you will traverse these waters and its age of partnership and alliances, and which ecosystem you want to be part of, and can you be part of two ecosystems. And we usually talk about multi-cloud, but we talk about multi-ecosystem as well. So with that, thank you, Dion. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And
advantage. Yeah, exactly. Well, I hope to see you at reInvent in about a month, and if not, I'm sure our paths will cross soon. So thanks for having me, Sarbjeet. It's always a great pleasure to be here.
thank you. I think I will see you at reInvent. If I don't, we will.
Awesome.
It's always good to sit down with you and record something. It's good virtually, but it's better that way. Thanks, guys, who joined. Darren for comments, and Bhaskar, you just came in, bring the right partnership. Yep, sure, partnerships are important. So thank you very much. With that, we're ending this here. Thanks for watching.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.